Some of my favorite videos to watch on YouTube are challenge videos. There's something so fascinating about beating video games with your own custom conditions, and I've always been interested in trying them out on my channel. In fact, I actually have done a challenge video before. If somehow you remember this video, you deserve a gold star because I made this over a year and a half ago. In this video, I tried beating the original Super Mario Bros. Without touching a single enemy. This made the game way more fun to play through with that extra layer of difficulty, and today I thought to myself, hey, I want to do that again. Even though I had fun with that challenge, the video itself could have been better. So now that my video making skills have improved slightly since then, I'm gonna do that challenge again. Is it possible to beat Super Mario Bros. On the NES without touching a single enemy? Here are the rules. I have to beat the original Super Mario Bros. Without killing or making contact with any enemies, with the only exception being Bowser, since he's technically a boss battle. I'm also going to try to avoid using secret exits, but I'm allowed to use them if it means the challenge can continue. I don't have an actual NES, so I'm just going to use my Switch instead. So without further ado, let's go! 1-1 was a very easy level. There were a few Goombas and Koopas wandering around, but I always had plenty of space to avoid them. 1-2 takes place underground, which meant I had to be a little more careful not to accidentally jump on an enemy, since I had less room to jump, but even so, it wasn't that bad. 1-3 features platforms high in the sky, and I quickly learned that you have to be patient with some levels or you'll suddenly run into something like I did here. But once I figured out where the enemies come in, I was all good. And 1-4 wasn't difficult at all since there are no enemies in sight aside from Bowser, which I was more than happy with. 2-1 started to ramp things up a little bit since enemies were spawning in closer together, so I had less wiggle room to screw up, but it was still more than possible. 2-2 was an underwater level filled with cheeps and bloopers. Since you're underwater, it's easier to get around the enemies if you're smart, but if you swim in the wrong way at the wrong time, you'll end up getting trapped like I did here this one time, so be careful of that. 2-3 was filled with cheeps who come flying out of the water and try to land on you. This level was super anxiety-inducing, not necessarily hard, and is possible to beat without touching anything, as long as you just run forward and stop from time to time. It just made me very nervous about messing up, but thankfully, once you're done with that, you have another castle level you can just breeze through with no enemies. Nice. 3-1 was another simple level with nothing really noteworthy. However, this is the level where we're first introduced to the Hammer Bros. They may not be a big threat in this level, but trust me, they'll be back with a vengeance later. 3-2 was literally just a straight line with enemies walking towards me, so as long as you don't run too fast, you'll be fine. 3-3 barely had any enemies aside from some red Koopas walking around, so that was easy, and so was 3-4, which once again had no enemies in sight. Sweet. 4-1 introduces us to my favorite annoying little Lakitu. Thankfully, he's not that bad in this level. Just keep running and occasionally stop for some piranha plants and you're all good. On to 4-2, and the only enemies you really need to be careful of are these Goombas near the beginning. There wasn't enough room for me to simply jump over them, so it's best to just come over to the left and wait for them to fall down. Other than that, you could carefully maneuver your way around the enemies by going through the level normally, or you could just do what I did and run across the top and beat it that way, whatever you prefer. 4-3 features tons of mushrooms and moving platforms, but all the enemies you really need to worry about show up for the first few seconds, and then you're fine. Now brace yourself, because 4-4 actually does feature an enemy, and that's this little tiny piranha plant, who's not even in your way, so you can just play the level and forget about him. But hey, at least we're halfway through the game, so that's gotta feel good. 5-1 takes place in the snow, because we haven't gotten enough of that yet. This level is where we get our first taste of the bullet bills, and even though they're easy to avoid, you still have to be cautious because they can be very unpredictable. And then we get to 5-2. Remember how I said that Hammer Bros would be back with a vengeance? Well, that's what we got here. This guy could not have been played placed in a more inconvenient position for this challenge. The way he jumps combined with how he throws his hammers makes it nearly impossible not to get hit. I tried hopping under him, but he would just land on me. I tried jumping over him, but I would just land on his head or one of his hammers would hit me. I tried so many times, but nothing was working. But then I realized something. Being Big Mario meant my hitbox was bigger, so I took an intentional death to become Small Mario and tried it out. At first, nothing was changing and I kept getting hit. But then, this happened. By running really fast and dropping down below and then almost immediately jumping, I could barely jump over the Hammer Bro without touching him. Holy shit, that was difficult, but it was so satisfying when I got it. But after that, the rest of the level wasn't that bad and only required a couple other precise jumps. 5-3 is literally just 1-3 again, but now bullet bills are shooting from the side. Thankfully, they move really slowly and didn't make beating the level any more challenging. 5-4 was also a copy of another level, that being 2-4, but there weren't any enemies thrown into the mix, so it was still really easy. 6-1 brings Nicobbq back into the mix, and I definitely had to be more cautious of him since I got closer to the top of the screen, but if you take your time when avoiding the spinies, you'll have no worries. Up next is 6-2, or as I like to call it, the land of the piranha plants. Like, seriously, there are so many piranha plants popping out of the many pipes in this stage. This does make the level more interesting as you have to keep in mind when these little guys will pop out, but just like before, being patient won't make it that hard. 6-3 is completely gray for some reason. I'm not sure why this level is like that, but hey, at least there's not that many enemies aside from the bullet bills near the end that aren't that hard to avoid, and 6-4, as usual, contained no enemies, so we're all good there. Now we're heading into 7-1, and this one was unbelievably stressful. Again, it wasn't too hard, especially for me who'd been playing like this for so long, but there were so many goddamn enemies. Koopas, piranha plants, hammer bros, and bullet bills all trying to attack me at once. It only took me a few tries, but I can't even tell you how much it freaked me out. 7-2 was a copy of 2-2, but now with a ton more bloopers. This level is still perfectly manageable, but it's much more irritating. I especially hated this one blooper that just sat there blocking my path, and it took me 5 minutes before I realized I could lure him down here and then quickly swim above him, so that kind of stunk. 7-3 was another ripoff of another level, this time being 2-3. You know, that annoying level with the flying Cheep Cheeps? Well, now they got Koopas roaming around too. Great. They don't really make the stage that more difficult, but it's definitely not helpful. But hey, 7-4 was a breeze, and just like that, we only have one world left, so let's finish this thing. So we enter 8-1, and it's obvious we reached the home stretch. Not only are the enemies a much bigger pain than usual by appearing in smaller spaces, but the level itself requires much more picky platforming, even if I wasn't doing this challenge. It took me a bit of practice to get everything down, but as long as you're calm and let certain enemies go by, then you'll be fine. 8-2 ramps it up even more by adding Nicobbq into the mix again, as well as throwing another hodgepodge of enemies for you to carefully weave around. Although, funny enough, the worst part of this level wasn't even the enemies, it was this stupid-ass jump that took me a billion tries to get over, but it's still doable. 8-3 surprisingly wasn't that bad. Aside from these hammer bros I had to carefully run under, I was able to avoid most of the enemies with no problem, and with that, it was time for 8-4. Yeah, you know how I said the other castles didn't have any enemies? Well, now I know why, because they were all hiding in this last castle. There's quite a few enemies in this last castle. They even got Cheep Cheeps flying around. How is that possible? I don't know, but they're here. That being said, they're not that terribly hard to avoid. Some take a little more effort than others, but overall, it's not that difficult of a final challenge. So, once you make it a Bowser and save the princess, we can confirm that yes, it is possible to beat Super Mario Bros. Without touching a single enemy. This was an awesome challenge to do, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you have any other games you want me to try this challenge with, let me know down in the comments below. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one.